The dust is settling, and we're coming to terms with what the people decided in yesterday's voting. What does it all mean for the future of our country? Well, that's some of what we talked about with strategic communications and former political consultant Paul Robbins and I as we considered the results of election 2016.
The first thing I think of is that ground organizations are way overvalued in political campaigns. And the media fell into this thought that, wow, they have the data mining that they're doing. They have all the whiz-bang kids that are really smart that know how to do this stuff. The digital platforms in terms of reaching out to people. In a turnout where people are really angry, field organization doesn't mean as much. In a close election, when there aren't big defining issues, it can make a difference, but it's way overvalued. That was my first reaction to it.
Going back a few months, I read your blog, a blog post back in May, in which you said, folks, Trump could win this whole thing. I got in touch with you and I said, you're way off, can't happen, come on the show and let's talk about it. You did. I reread your blog this morning. Wow, it was right. You talked about the Rust Belt states that were critical. You talked about the problems there with Bill Clinton and what he had done as president regarding the Rust Belt, regarding jobs going overseas. It was all there.
Yeah, it was a perfect storm, and it was starting to brew. And I think there was this kind of denial factor within the Republican Party, and then Trump blew through that and won his nomination. I think there was a denial factor among the Democrats. But you have stagnant economy. You have places like Pennsylvania, which I said in the blog could flip, where those jobs haven't come back. She said something that I'm sure she wished she hadn't said about we're going to put minors out of work. Ohio is in that boat as well. So you had all of that sitting there, and the economy drives a lot of these elections. And so we haven't fully recovered. People are angry. Government has done nothing over 8 years. He ran against the establishment in Washington, Democrats and Republicans collectively. I love this quote that Jerry Brown had some years ago when he ran for president. He said, there's not a Republican or Democratic Party in Washington. There's an incumbent party. So that was those factors were all together. And we can talk about, there's some late-breaking factors, I think, that also added to it. But the elements were there for this.
What about the Comey letter? 10 days before the election, all the polls seem to be showing Clinton edging up a point or two a day in many cases to maybe go as much as 10, 12, 13 points ahead with a week left. You try to coast. The letter comes out. We're looking at more emails. Granted, Sunday before the election, he says, oh, nothing there. The damage was done, wasn't it?
Well, you know what it did to me, as far as I'm concerned? I think it reinforced this narrative that there's always this baggage with the Clintons, and there was this Clinton fatigue. And there was a sense that she was maybe moving away from it, though the Republicans very effectively used the emails. And so people saw red when they saw that issue. And so here we go again. And you have members of Congress saying, if she is elected, we're going to start all over again and we're going to impeach her. So that's in the backdrop. That's more of this Washington morass, this conflict that people can't seem to get out of in Washington. And the Clintons are at the center of it. I think it's much more powerful than we realized. And the other thing that was happening was people early voting during that. So, we'll never know exactly what happened, but I think she got wounded by that. And in a close election, a change election, parties don't get a third term. I think that was maybe the nail in the coffin.
What about actually governing, leading? Donald Trump made all kinds of promises. Yeah, I know politicians do that, but I think a fair number of his people really came to him because of that. I'm going to end crime, day one. I hope nobody believed that one. ISIS, I'm going to bomb out of them. God forbid there's a terror attack. He's got a plan, he tells us. Nobody's ever seen it. He's really on the spot and with almost no friends in either party in leadership in Washington.
Well, I think two things are going to happen. I think Paul Ryan's going to run the country. I think there's a guy that does have a plan, that has a budget, Speaker of the House, and I think he knows what has to happen, and he's going to have both branches of government under his control. The other thing is, on those issues, if you really drill down on their voters, Trump voters, they don't really believe he's going to build a wall. They don't really believe he's going to deport Muslims. But the fact that he said that created a sense that this is important. This guy at least gets it. Maybe he won't execute these things, but he gets it, and I get the fact that he gets it. And, I always say that, campaigns, primary colors. What do you know about Trump? Build a wall, ban Muslims, right? The things that he says, if you had to try to encapsulate in a sentence Hillary Clinton, well, she's competent. She's done all different pieces of the job. In campaigns like this, the fifth grader, mentality of trying to get people to understand it. But I don't think people will hold them to the letter of the law. The Democrats may try to. I don't see that happening.
How much do you think it matters that, despite all his business experience, I think of our 45 now, he'll be number 45 presidents, only one who's never been in the military or in any public office, never answered to constituents in the way you do elected.
You know what, Jim?
It's a different world.
It is, but I think for decades we've been waiting for this experiment. The experiment is, how many times have we all heard, if they only ran it like a business, maybe a business guy should run the government. Things would be so much better. I have friends who feel that way. So, maybe we need the experiment over these next 4 years for people to say, can this work? Can these skills, whatever skills he has in terms of building his business, be applicable to governing? I think it's going to be difficult, but I think for decades this experiment has been in the offing, and you've heard this bubbling up over time, and I think we're there now. And so now we're going to see.
40 seconds. Could another Democrat without the same baggage, Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, our own Elizabeth Warren, would they have won this, do you think?
I think they would have had a better chance at the end of the day. There wouldn't be the FBI revelation. There wouldn't be being dogged by the WikiLeaks and the server issue. And quite honestly, Trump, to his credit, smartly absorbed the rigged system, mantle, which was essentially brought into the public discourse by Elizabeth Warren and extended by Bernie. Yeah, I think that might have been a different result.
Paul Robbins, thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Yep, glad to be here.